Well, it was starting to feel like the day might never come, but at long last I have got my hands on a Miyoo Flip. This is actually the Miyoo Flip V2 and I really like it. So this is the Miyoo Flip. It is a Game Boy Advance inspired clamshell format reworking of the immensely popular Miyoo Mini and Miyoo Mini Plus retro handhelds. Now this thing was announced a long time ago now, and at the time I was extremely excited for it. However, it was starting to feel like it might never even arrive, and if it did, I wasn't sure if it would still be relevant. Eventually it did release in very short quantities and I didn't manage to get my hands on one. There were a lot of reviews at the time that weren't particularly enthused about it, and there was actually quite a lot of criticism leveled at it. But this one here is the V2, a slight reworking of the original release, and apparently all the better for it. So this review unit was kindly provided by Lit NXT, and in this video I'm going to be telling you why it might just be making its way to the top of your most wanted handheld list. Alright, so first let's take a look at the actual form factor of this thing when it is closed. It is so solid feeling and compact and comfortable to hold and pocketable, and well, if you put it next to the original Game Boy Advance SP, size-wise, it is pretty much the same height. The width is also pretty much the same, very slightly taller than the original, but to all intents and purposes, exactly the same. And in fact, the hinge, as you can see, is a lot chunkier than the original SP hinge. It's also got a much more satisfying symmetry to it than the original. Also on the lower corners, the radius is slightly bigger than the original SP. When you come to opening it up, there is a very clicky hinge. My hinge works really well. Apparently some units not so much, but it's a very different hinge to the original SP. The original SP would open up and kind of just lock into one position and then would also lock kind of out at the top, but there was basically an open position and a closed, and it would kind of spring itself shut quite satisfyingly. This one does it with a lot more force. There are a number of settings and you can hear it click in position. That's because it's got metal hinges inside and it does kind of snap shut quite neatly. It's amazing that it does actually work with these analog sticks at the bottom here. They are set in ever so slightly reachable there, but because of the way the screen is recessed and the way everything lines up, it just fits so neatly together. It sits right next to the body as well. On the original there was a very slight gap with these slightly bumped up rubber cushions to stop it from sort of smashing together with the plastic. This has got that, but they don't stick out too much, which means you get a very close fit when it all closes up. At first it felt like it was maybe sprung a little bit too tightly, but you've got these two main positions all the way open, sitting upright like a kind of a laptop angle, and then closed. And once you get used to it, very easy to use. The click is actually quite satisfying. If you look at the play area compared to the original, you can tell that there is a lot of inspiration there, but instead of the 2 buttons, we've got the 4. The speaker exactly the same as the original select and start, very similar, but scaled down a little bit to make room for these 2 analog sticks here. These are not like any analog sticks I've seen on a handheld before. They're normally just kind of repurposed ones from a Nintendo Switch. These are much smaller and very comfortable to use, actually. I really like them. So yeah, it's very similar to the original SP. Obviously this is not the first one that's come along. There is also the Anbernic RG something XP SP, whatever it's called. We'll find out in a moment. This one, while we're on the subject of carry cases, I bought this carry case for my Anbernic SP. This is the Anbernic console here, which I really like actually, but I had to buy that with it. Now with the Miyoo Flip, it comes in a different kind of box. Normally they're quite fancy boxes that these things come in. This is just a sort of cheap cardboardy recyclable box, which is great, and that comes with the actual carry case in there, and it's a nice carry case. It's got a nice finish to it. It's sort of like a textile finish with the Miyoo logo on the front and this information on the back. You've got like a little game controller zipper. There's a mesh pocket in here. Comes with a few other bits and pieces. You've got like a little dongle for putting your micro SD cards in when you need to connect that to your computer. computer. You've got a little mini set of instructions. It came with the SD card. The SD card provided by Lit NXT is actually a branded SanDisk 64GB card. That actually has the operating system and the games on it. I did originally try it on the slot on the left and it wouldn't work. There were no games showing up at all. You need to use the one on the right near the power button, or at least in the case of my unit I did, and that just goes in a spring mechanism, and you've got that slight little scoop, so it's easy to tell which way around to put your card. But yeah, it comes with the carry case, really nice quality. The console fits very neatly inside it. You also get a USB A to C cable, a screen protector. Now, two things about the screen protector, if I can ever get it out of the case. It's only a flexible plastic one, it's not a glass one, and also I think the whole point of a clamshell form factor is to protect the screen when it's in a bag or something like that, so I won't be applying that to mine. But yeah, definitely worth noting that when you buy it, it comes by default with this really nice quality carry case. That's not to be underestimated. Okay, so side-by-side comparison with the Anbernic unit. Now, the Anbernic SP, to give it its full name, it is the RG35XX SP. It's the same size screen, but this is a much smaller unit. Right, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, so before we look too much at the Anbernic SP, let's just take a closer look at this thing here. So on the front, we've got the menu button, the D-pad, ABXY, slightly recessed into the casing, the two analog sticks, select and start, and the speaker opening. At the top, we've got the screen, which goes pretty much all the way up to the edge of the casing, and there's very little in the way of bezels on there. You've got the sort of power and charging light, very similar to the original SP. And then on top, it's just a plain flat surface. You could put a sticker on there or something if you feel like it looks a little bit too plain. On the back, you've got like this kind of original DMG style ribbed texture for grip, which is pretty good. And there's openings here and here, I assume for ventilation to stop the thing from overheating. On one side, as we've already seen, there is the power button with a little, I don't know what that is. I don't know whether that's like a little LED thing or a reset thing or something like that. And then we've got the slot for our SD card. If you want to put more games on, there is a slot on the other side for another card, and there is the volume up and down, which is actually the right way around with the plus and minus, plus at the top, minus at the bottom. At the bottom edge, you've got the USB-C for charging, and you've got a headphone socket for a 3.5mm jack going in there. Two lots of shoulder buttons, L1 and 2, R1 and R2. I think they're really nicely kind of set up there. We've also got another USB-C at the top here, and we've got a mini HDMI out. I have ordered a cable for that because I always get these consoles with that feature, and I've never actually tried it on my TV, so I've ordered a cable. I'll try that out and see how I get on. So yeah, there are two USB-C ports on there. Let's have a little look at the instructions. So I got a bit of a shock when I opened up all the instructions and they were all in Chinese, but on the other side it's got it all in English. So you've got the Type-C charging port at the bottom and the USB controller port at the top. I was originally having a few issues with trying to get it to charge, but that's because I was plugging the charger into the top. It doesn't say on the console. It kind of keeps things minimal, which is good, but it doesn't say anything on here. So you need to just know that, which threw me a little bit. So yeah, you just need to know that the charging port is on the bottom, and that one is for plugging in any external controllers and things like that. So yeah, if you're having issues with charging, make sure you plugged into the right one. And that is pretty much it. It's a lovely design. Like I said, it feels super solid. It's got all the main features that you want, and it's dead easy to navigate your way around. None of this hold, select and start, or hold the two sticks and click them down at the same time. There's actually a menu button, and also the menu button's placed to match the original backlight button on the SP, so that's pretty cool. Right, back to comparing with the Anbernic unit. So I did really like this. At first, it felt like it was incredibly chunky compared to the original SP, because it is a much bigger version. But given that these things were designed mainly for kids to play, the ergonomics of this as an adult are actually really satisfying. And I felt, despite a few shortcomings, like it had extremely clicky buttons. I've done a video about how to modify that slightly. Now I've done a few mods to this thing. It is a immensely satisfying console to use. It's very comfortable, it's capable, it looks nice. The hinge on this one is much more like the original SP. It's a much softer mechanism. You don't hear it at all. And there's a gentle kind of thud as it closes. Whereas this one is much more purposeful, click and snap shut kind of thing, which makes them both very different, really. When switched on, this is where some of the differences really start to become apparent. So you switch on, just press the power button, and we get the green light come on. The Miyoo OS is all right. I mean, the thing we have to remember is this is Miyoo's original success story, the Miyoo Mini. This is actually the Miyoo Mini V4, so this came out quite a bit after even the Miyoo Mini Plus. But the reason why this was so popular was because of this, Onion OS. This is a custom version of the original operating system, which is just fantastic. It's an absolutely superb way to play your games. And if we manage to get a port of Onion OS on here, this will be unstoppable. But at the moment, instead of having Onion, which is really, really good, and if you've got one of these or if you've got a Miyoo Mini Plus, definitely recommend you get set up with Onion OS. But in this case, because this is relatively new, we're working with the stock Miyoo operating system, which, to be honest, compared to a lot of these handhelds that you can get, isn't too bad at all. You can have a few different themes if you want a slightly different look to it. You just go into settings, go down to themes, and you can choose various different ones. So this is currently on the cozy, but there's various different ones that we can choose from. The default one will look familiar. That's just like you will have seen on the original Miyoo Mini if you got one of those and didn't have Onion OS working on it. Again, I've got that set to cozy, which was on this by default. And speaking of default, I've not actually had to make many changes. You see, one of my criticisms of the last few handhelds I've been looking at is that when they turn up and they've got their kind of default SD card in, they're often set to not really play at their optimal settings. This one has got a few shortcomings in terms of language and a few other things that are on it. But one of the things that I like about it is that when you are loading a game, for example, if we go into Game Boy and we'll just launch Tetris here, quick note, Tetris is not on the supplied SD card. As normal, there are a few kind of more popular high profile games, particularly with Nintendo, with the Mario games and things, that are not on here, but there was a bit of additional room on the SD card. So using the supplied adapter, I put the SD card, connected it up to my computer, and put some additional ROMs on there. And as you can see, when it loads up a Game Boy ROM, it is set up to kind of closely resemble the original Game Boy. So without having to change any settings, it doesn't do the thing of default stretching it right across the screen. And speaking of the screen, it's a really nice, bright, high quality screen with very, very little in the way of bezels. So if we do a quick comparison, I don't even know if I've got any power in this thing at the moment. Okay, I was going to show you the borders on the Anbernic SP because they are quite a bit bigger, but I've loaded it up and it launched straight into Drill Dozer and everything looks great, but my menu button doesn't appear to respond. So I will have to investigate that. So you can see at the edge there is very, very little in the way of bezels and borders other than the overlay borders. And in terms of these overlays and settings, as I say, they're actually set pretty well. We'll come out of this one. You just press the menu button, go to exit game, and you can come back out. We can go into a different format. So for example, Game Boy Advance. I've added some extra stuff in there like hacks and Pokemon hacks and things like that. So all the games that are preloaded have artwork with them as well. You'll be able to spot the ones that I put in because they don't, but they still add themselves to the list quite easily. So let's just go with Atari Anniversary Advance and you'll see how it actually loads up the Game Boy Advance games. So you get that border there, but you saw that there was a much bigger border on the Anbernic. On this one, it's much more subtle, but it does still have that little bit at the bottom with the Game Boy Advance logo, which makes it look like the original Game Boy Advance SP, which I quite like. I think it's a nice touch, and it's quite nice that that's done by default. There's even a very slight shadow around the edge to give the impression of this kind of lens that was slightly away from the screen on the original console, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I've not really had any issues in terms of playing games at all. The interface is great. It's comfortable to hold. Your hands just naturally fall into the right position. The buttons and D-pad are brilliant. Like, absolutely brilliant. There's so many of these handheld consoles that you'll get and they do everything well, but you get like false diagonals or the D-pad's not comfortable or the buttons are a bit clicky. These are, dare I say, perfect, or as close to perfect as I've had on one of these. They are definitely a throwback to the original buttons. They feel quite similar, but they're not particularly clicky at all. They're they're just right. And as I say, the analog sticks as well, they will work in the place of the D-pad. But if you're playing games such as one of the Dreamcast games, for instance, so if you're playing a game that uses the analog sticks, they are there. I mean, they're not massively comfortable to use. They're right at the bottom. Holding two at the same time, I think, would be incredibly awkward. But you're generally just going to be using this one on the left. Because it's such a small, compact console, you can hold most of it in your right hand and just use your left hand to operate the thumbstick. So that's really pretty good. Ergonomics wise, I quite like it. So we'll just load up the game. Anyway, yeah, so Dreamcast works pretty well on it, and you've got the analog stick control on there, which is pretty easy to use and surprisingly easy to hold given it's so far down on here. The games are really good on it. They play really, really well, but it's the setup of the games that I am particularly impressed with. So let's have a little look at another one. For instance, if we load up a game on Game Gear, Spider-Man versus the Kingpin. And again, largely just to show you the setup, that, you know, it shows you everything's loaded up there. In this case, that is stretched all the way to the edge of the screen. So I've kind of picked the wrong one there, but it still looks really good. And the screen, it's got really vibrant colors, nice clarity to it, looks great. If we come back out of there and go to maybe Game Boy Color, and we'll load up Pokemon Pinball, because I use that to test the vibration. It does actually have rumble in it. The vibration motors are really good. There's very little rattle. A lot of the time when these things vibrate, you get a lot of rattle. So first things first, you get like this neat little border around here with the Game Boy Color logo at the side and the little power battery there, and pretty much nothing at the top and bottom to maximize the size of the screen. And it's got that kind of pixel grid overlay. It looks very much like a Game Boy Color display, but when we are playing, the vibration motor in there works. So it's pretty strong vibration on it, but there's not much rattle, so you just feel it in the console, but you don't hear it too much, which I think is a good thing. That's Game Boy Color. What else have we got on here? Mame. Someone tell me please what it is so I can just pronounce it right. Mega Drive on there. I think the selection of games on this card is good. Obviously it is missing some of the big hitters like the Nintendo ones that you'll have to put on yourself, but there is a good selection of games. It's not necessarily your standard selection, and all the emulators that you would expect are there, and they all perform well and they look great. Sound wise, I mean, the speaker, it's fine, it does the job, and it's forward facing so you can hear it. You don't necessarily have to have the volume on that high, and of course you've always got the option of using your headphones. If we have a look at the other things that we can do in terms of consoles, there's quite a few to choose from there. Some of them work, some of them don't, some of them have got games, some of them haven't, but most of them seem to be pretty good. PlayStation performs really well on there. Saturn, we've got an interesting selection of games on the card there. Unfortunately, I was quite excited about Saturn Bomberman, but when I went to load it, I just got a blank screen. No, there's nothing happening. Fortunately, you can press the menu button and then just exit and come back out. Now, not all of the Saturn games did that. Many of them loaded, but that one I was quite excited about and it didn't load. Super Famicom WonderSwan Color Pico 8 was good on it actually. It's got a selection of games already on there. So this is Breakout Hero. Now you don't get the full Pico 8 experience. You can't get Explore on there, which is kind of like a Netflix for retro games. It's really awesome. But that involves you paying like a one-off fee, and if you have never tried Pico 8, I would totally recommend paying that fee. The amount of gaming I've had for my money is really, really good. And I think having these sort of games on these handhelds ready to play, I don't know whether it's a little sketchy. It gives people a bit of a taste of what Pico 8 is like and hopefully encourages them, like it did for me, to try out the full version. If I press menu, I can exit game and I can come back out of there. Now, speaking of sketchy, there is no port master on here that I can find. It is on the SD card. When I put the SD card into the computer, it was on there, but there's a few things that are on the SD card that don't show up on here. So whether it's just stuff that isn't necessarily compatible with this particular operating system, but it has got ports 32, which has a selection of ported games on there. AM2R, I was really excited about, another Metroid 2 remake. It plays really, really well on there. It was originally in Chinese, like a lot of this menu is, but yeah, a little sketchy that a lot of the ports are already on here. Things like Undertale, Iconoclast, Streets of Rage remake, Super Meat Boy, Shovel Knight. These are games that should be paid for, and they're just on there. AM2R is a free game, so ones like that are okay, but I played that quite a bit. It looks great. In fact, I'm going to load it up because it's something that I think is a fantastic achievement for an unofficial Metroid game. I think it plays really, really well. But one of the things about it was I really enjoyed it. I was playing it for hours. I had a save on there, and then when I came out, it didn't save my game. Now, when I press start and it loads up, it will come up and it will say new game, new game, new game. And I've tried all sorts of different things to try and get it to keep hold of my save game, but no luck. If anyone watching knows how to get that to work, please let me know, because I would love to play this on this handheld and keep up my progress. But as it stands, I put a couple of hours in and then came out of it, tried to go back in, and yeah, back to the beginning. So that was a shame. If you need to get out of this, you just use the menu on here to go to exit game. That's some of the ports. A lot of these menus are in Chinese, and in fact AM2R was in Chinese as well. I used Google Lens to put my camera over the screen, and then you can, I'll tell you what, I'll show you. It will translate what you are looking at, which is pretty handy. So you've got the Chinese there. I've set mine up to translate Chinese to English so I can see what games are on there. So I've got Free Planet, Cursed Castle, I'm assuming, Cyber Bartender, Super Meat Boy, Shovel Knight, Metroid Prime 2 remake. So it doesn't quite get it right, but it's an amazing bit of tech, isn't it? Now, in addition to the ports, because we've got all of the different sort of games that we can choose from in here, and there's loads, there's good selection, the layout's nice, the interface is good, it's snappy and responsive. But if we go into apps, we can go into various different things. We can boot RetroArch, we can go into Commander, which takes us into the SD card where you can have a good explore of what's in there. And then again, it's got like some full release indie games just on the SD card. That one there is Garden Story. Balatro is on there. TMNTSR, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Sonic Mania, Half-Life, Wipeout, Stardew Valley. Yeah, there's just loads of these games on there, like Celeste, that shouldn't really be on there. Like, these are games that should be paid for. The money should be going to the people who are making them. These are like small studios who are probably really struggling to get by, and I think things like this, again, you could argue it's a bit of a taste of the game and then people might buy it, but yeah, anyway. So they are there if you want them, and because you can alter the contents of the SD card, you can delete them if you want as well. If you go into settings, now we are in the, what do we call it, native operating system, but we've also got emulation station as a possibility, which you can set to use by default, and it will launch to that instead. It's quite easy to undo. I just noticed as I knocked the lid, as the hinge snaps open, there is still a little bit of wiggle room to it. So you see it moves a little bit. It doesn't like lock and hold in position. That's something that always annoyed me about my new 3DS XL. I want it to kind of lock in place and then feel dead solid, but there's also a little bit of wiggle to it. Doesn't seem to have bothered anybody else, but I don't know, I'd rather it just snap into position and hold. If I compare that to my Anbernic, once that's in position, it just holds nice and sturdy, like the build quality, even though it's only got that one opening position, even though it doesn't snap, I actually find that much more satisfying and feels a little more high quality. This one, I know some people have had the hinge break and not work at all. This just feels a little, I mean, it'll snap into position, it'll hold, but I think I prefer the Anbernic hinge. Have I switched it off? I put it in sleep mode. So you've just got the power button, you tap it once, goes into sleep mode. So this is on emulation station, slightly different interface, but once you go in, you've got the same games to choose from. It's not a fully featured version of emulation station, or at least it's not set up to run in the same way I've had it run before. However, if you're back out of here and you press the start button to go in the menu, you can instead choose to use the Miyoo UI and go back to that, which is what we are going to do. So that is it, I think. We've got recents for your recent games, favourite for your favourite games as you're going through the game list. For example, if we're on Atari Lynx and we want to add Batman Returns, then we can press the menu button and we can add favorite, and it will put a little star next to it. And then when we come back out, we go into our favorites list. We've got Batman Return in there, got the battery indicator up at the top there. RetroArch, we can go in there, and again, it's a slightly different interface to what you'd have on the regular game menu, but it opens up the same games. There are all these things that this console can do, but largely what it does and what I've been using it for is for playing games, and it does that just wonderfully. One of the things I really like about this and the card that came with it is everything just seems to be set up to run correctly. I've not had to faff about with controls or anything. I have gone in and dabbled and changed them around, but I've found in general the defaults are pretty good. Now, I think that is one of the real strengths about this handheld, is that everything seems to be set up pretty well. Yes, you can go into the settings and you can tweak it to your own preferences. However, what I've found is that even though I've gone in and I've dabbled with changing around the controls and the setups a little bit, for the most part, everything that loads up is set up to run really well. There's nice overlays, it's chosen a good kind of color scheme, it's chosen good borders. I think it's great, and I think a lot of the time with these handhelds, when I'm reviewing them, it's like I'm trying to explain to people how they can go into menus and change things and sort things out so that it runs in the way that they might want. This is the first time in quite a while I've had one where really you get it, you plug in the SD card, you load it up, and everything is configured to run pretty well. The operating system was a little out of date. It was a 2024 version, but I got the SD card, put it into my computer, went onto the Miyoo website, and it's very easy to download the latest firmware for this console, apply it to the SD card, load it up, and it installed no problems at all. So don't let that put you off. And it didn't make any changes to the setup, the settings, or anything like that. Everything is running fine. And I'm really pleased with it, because when I saw the reviews first time around of the V1, people weren't particularly positive about it. Some people were really angry about it. So my hopes, which had originally been high, then I'd had the Anbernic, which I thought was fantastic. I wasn't that sure whether this was really going to excite me as much as it has done, but I've been playing it all week. I started just on my usual default of, right, what settings do I need to change? It didn't need any changing. It's great. The buttons are fantastic. The ergonomics are great. I think it looks nice. I'm quite pleased with this kind of American Super Nintendo style purple button layout. The hinge, I'm not a fan of the kind of, I don't like loud noises. So I quite like the delicate close and open and the kind of holding confidently in position of the hinges of the Anbernic. I do prefer that. However, I think having a couple of positions for it to set in is good. The click and the wobble bothers me a little bit, but definitely not enough for me to not recommend this console. I think it's great. Anyone else who's got one of these, how are you getting on with it? Let me know. I have heard about some people having issues with theirs. This one is working perfectly. The SD card that came with it from Lit NXT is excellent. If you want to get your hands on one of these, I have got an affiliate link in the description for Lit NXT that will help out my channel. And if you use the code JoeBleeps, you'll also save yourself 10% off your order. So as I mentioned before, this is not the first clamshell form factor emulator handheld to come along. The most popular one by far up to this point is the Anbernic SP, and for very good reason. It is an excellent console, and you might even be able to pick it up cheaper than this one at this point in time. If you want to know a bit more about it, I'm going to leave a video linked up here for you to check out. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.